Hey there, welcome back. Or maybe you're here for the first time, in which case, hello, and congratulations on finding one of the slower corners of the internet. The kind where we whisper history at you until you fall asleep, question everything or both. Tonight, we're going to talk about assassins, but not the cool kind. Not the sleek figures from modern action movies who leap across rooftops, flip their knives in slow motion, and wear leather outfits with suspiciously good tailoring. No, those are fantasy. We're going to the Middle Ages, where being an assassin was less high drama and more. Please don't sneeze while hiding in a compost barrel. So go ahead and dim the lights, fluff the pillow. Maybe light a candle if that's your thing. Turn on a fan for that quiet hum in the background. And let's sink slowly into the darkest parts of history. You won't need a dagger, just a blanket. Also, if you like what I do here, gently muttering history until your brain gives up, please consider subscribing. No pressure, of course. Just a friendly whisper from the shadows. All right, let's begin. So, you want to be a medieval assassin, or at least learn why it sucked. Well, first, forget everything you think you know. The training montage in the hidden monastery, the secret society with coded handshakes and inspirational flute music, that didn't happen. Nobody in medieval Europe woke up and thought, today feels like a great day to stab a bishop in the neck and then disappear into the mist. Becoming an assassin in the Middle Ages was never a dream. It was a consequence. It was a job you landed in when life had already chewed you up and spit you out in a hood and muddy boots. You didn't apply. There were no auditions, no tryouts. You just became it, like mold or regret. Picture this. You're a peasant. The crops failed. Your last job involved mucking out pigs for half a turnip a week. You're covered in more fleas than ambition. You've been caught stealing twice, once bread, once someone's left boot. The sheriff's men know your face. The tavern wench won't take your coins. And someone in the village is telling people your breath kills bees. Then one night, in the dim corner of a stinking inn, a man with a hood and too many rings slides a small purse across the table. He doesn't smile. He doesn't blink. He says only one word. Interested? You don't ask what it is. You know someone needs to die, and somehow it's going to be your job. There's no ceremony, no cloak fitting, no welcome basket. What you get is a name, a vague map, and a very clear deadline. Your target? Never someone easy. You're not offing turnip farmers or cranky shepherds. You're gunning for corrupt lords, exiled knights, wandering monks with powerful enemies, men with guards, women with spells, people with castles, moats, and 3 bodyguards who sleep in shifts. But that's the thing. No one hires an assassin when diplomacy is still an option. If someone wants to pay a stranger to make another stranger stop breathing, it means they've already tried everything else. You're the last resort, which means your job comes at the worst possible time. The target already suspects. The rumors are flying. The locks have been changed. The wine has been double-checked, and the dog now sleeps in the kitchen. No one wants you to succeed, not even the people who hired you, because the quieter you are, the more dangerous you seem. And if you can kill a baron, well, what's stopping you from killing them next? Also, there's no contract, no scroll, no seal, no terms and conditions. You might get paid half up front. You might not. You might get promised a farm and 2 goats on the edge of nowhere. Or the guy might smile and say, payment upon proof, which is medieval for, you'll never see me again. And even if you do succeed, if you sneak past the guards, strangle the priest, vanish into the wheat field with your hood still dry and your blade still clean, guess what? You don't get a party. You don't get a medal. You don't even get a warm meal. You run. You keep running. And the only proof you existed will be some whisper in a tavern that the bishop fell on a fork. Because being an assassin in the Middle Ages wasn't a role. It was an erasure. The better you were, the less you were seen. No legacy. No children. No stories sung by bards. You were the ghost that made people lock their doors a little earlier. The shadow behind every flickering torchlight. The reason someone double-checked the stew. And in the end, The best you could hope for was to vanish completely. And the worst? We'll get to that in a bit. So, still feel like picking up that rusty dagger? Don't worry, there's more. Because tonight, we're going to walk through the full, miserable career of a medieval assassin. From their filthy start, to their haunted middle, to the inevitable blood-smeared end. Along the way, we'll learn about disguises that don't work, poisons that backfire, dogs that ruin everything, and why nobody ever trusted a guy who sold herbs and didn't blink. And if at any point you need to close your eyes, drift off, and let the horror softly melt into your pillow, that's okay. I'll still be here, whispering from the shadows. Until next time, let's meet again soon. So, you're officially an assassin now. Or at least, that's what the man in the corner tavern said, just before handing you a name and a very greasy map drawn in what you hope is ink. No ceremony. No blessing from the guild. No letter of recommendation. Because here's the truth. You don't get this job. This job gets you. Becoming an assassin in medieval times wasn't a career path. It was more like a consequence. A punishment. The kind of role you land in when all the doors have closed, the bridges have burned, and your last clean shirt smells like the back end of a goose cart. No one ever says, when I grow up, I want to be someone who hides in cellars for 3 days waiting to stab a duke while pretending to be a mute stable boy. But life is weird like that. Let's rewind a little. Let's say you were born in a village, mud huts, goats, the occasional festival where someone juggles onions. Nothing glamorous, but it works. Then a drought hits. Then a tax collector shows up. Then your mother dies of something called the fever, which no one can explain, and your father disappears after falling into debt, which sounds a lot like getting buried in a shallow grave. Now it's just you. You're 16. You have a bad cough, a knife you stole from a traveling pie merchant, and a deep suspicion that your best friend is going to rat you out the next time a constable walks by. You steal. You survive. And eventually, you stop wondering if tomorrow will be better. You just hope it doesn't rain. Now imagine one evening. You help a drunk nobleman's carriage get unstuck from a ditch. You don't do it for gold. You do it because if he dies here, the guards will blame you. But the nobleman survives. He notices your quick thinking, your low profile, the fact that you didn't hesitate to jab a stick into a horse's flank. Later that week, a pouch shows up under your bedroll. No note, just a pouch. With coins. And a name. It's not a job offer. It's an expectation. Congratulations. Someone has noticed you're good at solving problems in ways that don't involve witnesses. But it doesn't always start that way. Some assassins are ex-soldiers, wounded in battle, tossed aside like bent armor. The kind of men who once served proudly and now survive by selling their sword arm to whoever's willing to fill their cup. Others were criminals first. Thieves with soft feet, con men with steady hands, smugglers who learned how to vanish. Then there were the ones no one noticed. The servant who heard every secret. The midwife who knew where the guards slept. The herbalist who understood which flowers made dreams and which ones made funerals. It wasn't about strength. It was about silence. What unites them all is this. Something went wrong. A life derailed. A trust broken. A line crossed. And after that, the only door left open was the one that leads into darkness. So no, there's no assassin recruitment fair. No mentor named Elias who says, "Welcome, child. The dagger is an extension of your soul." There's just a moment. A whisper. A sack of coins that looks a little too heavy for comfort. And the slow realization that if you say yes, there's no going back. Because here's the thing about being recruited as an assassin. No one ever really trusts you. Not even the people paying you. You think the nobleman wants your loyalty? He wants your absence. You think the merchant hiring you to take out his rival wants a future working relationship? He wants a future where you never existed. And when the job is done, what are you going to say? "Excuse me, sir, I stabbed your cousin very discreetly, and now I'd like the rest of my fee." No, that conversation never happens. You do the job. You leave the scene. And if you're smart, you vanish before anyone remembers what you look like in the first place. Still, some people take pride in it. They give themselves names. The Black Hand, the Silent Blade, The Crow. They write letters in blood and sign them with sigils. But that's not how you survive. That's how you get caught. Because in reality, medieval assassins didn't have calling cards. They had rats in their hair, blisters on their feet, and 3 backup escape plans involving barrels, tunnels, and sometimes dressing up like a nun. You learn fast. You learn to stop asking questions. You learn how to read a crowd, spot guards, map exits, and guess which tavern is least likely to burn down before sunrise. You learn that trust is a fantasy, that smiles are dangerous, and that the only safe drink is the one you pour yourself from a bottle you stole. And when you mess up, and you will mess up, you learn what it feels like to have 3 angry knights chasing you through the mud while someone's very large dog attempts to bite your thigh off. And you start to realize something. You don't really belong anywhere anymore. Not in towns. Not in camps. Not even the shadows. You're something in between. A moving secret. A ghost with cracked boots and too many names. You lie when people ask what you do. I'm a traveling candle seller. I'm a shepherd looking for my lost sheep. I'm a mute monk on pilgrimage. No one believes you, but they also don't want to be rude. And that's your advantage. So how do you get the job? You don't. The job gets you. It finds you in your worst moment. It waits until you've got nothing left. Then it hands you a knife and says, try not to get caught. There's no honor, no title, no coat of arms. Just mud, guilt, and the distant sound of someone shouting that they just found a body in the garden. And somewhere far away, a purse jingles. Half full, maybe. Soft pause. Still with me? Good. Next, we'll talk about tools. Knives, poison, disguises, and why none of them actually work the way you think they do. Because in the Middle Ages, being clever only gets you killed slower. See you in soon. Until then, stay quiet, and maybe double bolt the door. Welcome back. Still awake? Still hiding in the proverbial shadows. Curled up with a blanket and a low-burning candle? Good. Because tonight, we're going to talk about tools. The things medieval assassins carried. Not to feel powerful, but because not having them usually ended in failure, or fire, or an angry baron yelling intruder, while a dozen men with axes try to turn you into soup. So let's look inside the assassin's toolkit. Don't worry, it's probably not poisoned. Probably. First, the most obvious item. The knife. No, not the shiny kind you see in movies. We're talking about a real medieval blade. Crude, uneven, probably stolen. Definitely not named Whisperfong or something elegant. It was short, dull halfway through, and wrapped in whatever cloth you hadn't already used as a bandage. You weren't fencing with it. You weren't doing tricks. You were hoping it stayed sharp long enough to stab a sleeping duke through a feather pillow without waking the cat. That's it. Then there was rope. And no, not for swinging dramatically from rafters. Rope was for climbing into places no one wanted you, tying up things you couldn't let go, or, if things went very badly, getting tied up yourself. Some assassins also carried string, thread, wax, and bits of charcoal, not for spells, but for sealing windows shut, marking silent escape paths, or drawing crude diagrams on the inside of a stolen boot. Because yes, maps go on boots. Paper was expensive, and you didn't have a desk. Now let's talk poison. Poison. The assassin's most misunderstood tool. Movies make it look romantic. A drop in a goblet. A faint smile. A quiet death. But medieval poisons? They were chaos in liquid form. They were made from mushrooms, toads, minerals, and sometimes dung. Yes, dung. You could try to poison someone with nightshade. If you like vomiting, inconsistent results, and the risk of dying from inhaling the fumes before the victim even showed up. Or you could use arsenic, if you had money, which you didn't. Or belladonna, which sometimes worked, and sometimes made people burp for 5 hours and then go on a spiritual journey. Then there was the issue of delivery. You don't just poison the wine. That wine is guarded, tasted, sniffed by the steward, the cook, the cook's assistant, the dog, and a man whose job title is literally cupbearer. That's right. There's a guy whose only job is to stand there and say, smells off, and then throw the cup into a fire. You think you're getting past him? You're not. So instead, you bribe the servant who washes the apples. You whisper to the spice girl. You sneak into the cellar and pour something into the stew, but only after it's already past inspection. And if you get caught, you'd better pretend you're blind and looking for the latrine. Let's move on to disguises. Another myth. Everyone thinks assassins dressed in black. Cloaks, cowls, leather boots, dramatic capes that flap in the wind. But in medieval Europe, if you wore all black, people noticed. Black cloth was expensive. Like, I own land expensive. So if you showed up dressed like a theater villain, someone was definitely going to ask what noble house you served. Real assassins wore rags, dirt-colored tunics, brown cloaks, things that smelled bad enough to make people back away. You wanted to blend in, not look cool. Some carried herbs, not just for poisoning, but to chew, to mask smells, or to throw into fires to create smoke. Others had pebbles to toss down hallways, a bent spoon, a mirror shard tied to a string to peek around corners. And some carried nothing at all, because the more you carried, the more likely you were to drop something. And nothing kills stealth like dropping a small, clanging vial of powdered frog guts during a funeral procession. Yes, that happened once. We don't talk about it. Now, let's talk transportation. You didn't ride in on a horse with a dark mane and a tragic backstory. You walked through mud with blisters. Sometimes you rode in the back of a cart with turnips, or clung to the side of a merchant caravan, pretending to be a sack of wheat. You got there stinking, hungry, and already regretting everything. And then you had to start the job. And finally, the one thing every assassin needed. Silence. Not magical. Not blessed. Just practiced. The ability to wait. To breathe quietly. To hide in plain sight. To say nothing. Ever. Because assassins weren't feared because they shouted. They were feared because no one ever heard them coming. And when they left, all they left behind was a cold bowl of soup and a missing duke. Of course, silence didn't always help. Because even the best assassin could be betrayed by a sneeze, a splinter, a dog, or a loose chicken. Yes, chickens again. If you ever want to ruin an assassination, add a chicken. They know. They always know. So, to review, your kit included a dull knife, questionable poison, scratchy rope, 3 disguises that smell like feet, and a silent prayer. Your backup plan? Run. Your exit strategy? Don't get seen. And your best hope? That the person who hired you didn't decide you were a loose end. Because remember, the moment your job is done, someone might be sending another assassin after you, with the same kit, the same target, and the same mud-stained cloak that smells like a goat. Feeling cozy yet? Good. Because next, we're going to talk about the real battlefield for assassins. Not blades, not poison, not guards, but gossip, the deadliest weapon in all of medieval Europe, and the one thing you couldn't outrun. Until next time, sleep tight, and maybe don't trust the cook. Welcome back. The candle's a little lower now, the room quieter, the world softer. You've made it this far. You've picked up your rusty dagger, smeared dirt on your face for a disguise, and climbed into a cart of cabbage to sneak into a nobleman's estate. You've memorized the halls, bribed a kitchen boy, and hidden in a cupboard for hours, waiting for your target to blow out the candle and fall asleep. You are silence itself. But none of that matters, because someone talked. In medieval Europe, gossip wasn't just annoying, it was fatal. You see, there were no cameras, no newspapers, no internet. There was only talk. Talk by candlelight. Talk at the market. Talk whisper between servants while scrubbing chamber pots. Talk, talk, talk. And once it started, it didn't stop. Let's imagine a scenario. You've been in a village for 3 days. You've changed clothes twice. You've spoken exactly 4 words. Beer! Room. Thank you. You haven't made eye contact with anyone. You've smiled just once. And even then, it was more of a vague grimace. But the tavern keeper's wife? She's already suspicious. Because you sleep too lightly. You eat too slowly. You wear boots that are too nice for someone who claims to be a traveling candle repairman. And worst of all, You didn't laugh when the jester fell off the stool last night. That's it. You're doomed. Because now she's whispering to her cousin, who whispers to the stable hand, who whispers to a guard. And that guard, he's bored, tired. He hasn't stabbed anyone in weeks. So he walks to the Lord's chamber and casually says, "There's a stranger in the tavern. Says he sells wax. Smells like blood." And suddenly, your name is on everyone's lips, even though no one actually knows it. That's the power of gossip. It outruns your boots. It creeps under doors. It sneaks ahead of you into every room and says, "Watch this one." And once people are watching, it's over. You can't kill what you can't surprise. But gossip didn't just come from servants. Oh no, assassins were also undone by rivals. Because here's something no one tells you. There wasn't one assassin. There were dozens. Every city had at least one. Some had guilds. Some didn't. Some were trained. Most weren't. But they all competed for the same thing. Coin. So if one got a contract, the others noticed. And if you think assassins are loyal to each other, you're adorable. Assassins told guards, told priests, told each other, "Watch out for the new guy. He's working the north wing. He always uses poison and wine. Switch to goblets. He wears a fake beard. And sometimes forgets to glue it on." That's right. Even other killers gossiped. Because nothing is more dangerous than an assassin with a bruised ego. And then there were the bards. Yes, the musicians. You'd think they'd be harmless. Lutes, flutes, poems about flowers and long winters. But bards were the internet of the medieval world. They heard everything. And if a nobleman died suspiciously, and a stranger left town the same night, you can bet some bard was halfway through writing a tragic ballad called "The Silence Beneath the Cloak." It wouldn't name names, of course, but it would rhyme dagger with swagger. And soon every inn from here to the coast would be singing about the mysterious man with dark eyes who paid in silver and never looked back. Guess who that is? You. Congratulations. You're now famous, which is just another word for dead. Even when gossip wasn't about you, it still hurt you. Because when rumors of assassins spread, everyone locked up tighter. Guards were doubled. Food was blessed. Rooms were checked. People even made their dogs sleep indoors. And yes, those dogs hated you. They always hated you. Somehow they knew. And when things went truly wrong, when a high-ranking noble was killed and the whispers turned into screams, a new rumor would start. One that said you weren't human, that you had no face, that you could fly, that you breathed through your skin and slept upside down in trees. One village once believed assassins were the reincarnated spirits of drowned soldiers. Another thought they could melt into shadows, unless hit with holy water. People are strange like that. You might think these myths worked in your favor. That fear kept people from fighting back. But it didn't. It made them paranoid, made them search harder, made them kill faster. Because if they thought you were a demon, they didn't ask questions. They just reached for the nearest torch. And if by some miracle you got out, the gossip still followed. You'd walk into a new village, months later, dressed as a tinker with a bag full of bent spoons. And someone would whisper, "Is that him? The one from Castle Blackthorn?" You'd deny it, laugh nervously, offer to fix their pans. But they'd never quite believe you. And you'd never quite stop looking over your shoulder. Because gossip never sleeps. It just changes accents. So yes, assassins in the Middle Ages had daggers, and poison, and bad knees. But their most dangerous enemy wasn't the target. It was the old woman on the porch who saw them slip into the garden. It was the kitchen boy who recognized their boots. It was the monk who overheard them muttering in Latin. It was the bard who smiled too much and asked too many questions. It was gossip, relentless, unstoppable, and fatal. Next time, we'll talk about payment, not the gold itself, but the awkward little dance where someone hires you to kill and then decides they'd rather not pay you. Because in the Middle Ages, getting stiffed was a professional hazard. See you in segment 5. If you're still awake, maybe whisper this one to someone tomorrow, but softly. Welcome back. The world is quiet now, a little darker, a little heavier. Maybe the wind is tapping the window. Maybe your blanket has wrapped just a little tighter. You've learned how to get the job. You've studied your tools. You've survived the gossip. And tonight we talk about money, but not in a fun way. Because in the medieval world, getting paid to kill someone was a little like getting promised a warm bath in a blizzard. Sounds great, but don't count on it. Let's set the scene. You're sitting in a tavern. It smells like regret, old cabbage, and the vague memory of blood. A man sits across from you. Or maybe it's a woman. Or maybe they're wearing enough layers and hooded cloaks to make gender completely irrelevant. They say your name, your real name, and that's never a good sign. Then they slide something across the table, a small pouch. You open it. Inside, silver coins. Cold, tangible, real. Your fingers itch. Your brain flares up with questions. Who is this? How do they find me? What do they want? They answer all of that with one sentence. He needs to die. There's no contract, no written agreement, no notarized forms, just a whisper in a pouch. And here's the thing they always say. You'll get the other half when the job is done. Half now, half later. Sounds fair, doesn't it? Except later, in assassin language, has a very flexible definition. It could mean after we verify the job, or after the funeral, or sometimes never, because you're dead and I used your payment to buy wine and a new goat. You see, when someone hires an assassin, they don't want a relationship. They want an event, a brief one, a quiet one, preferably with no return policy. So once you've done the job, what happens? Do you stroll back into the inn and announce, mission accomplished? No. You wait. You listen. You hope that when the news breaks, Lord Thaddeus slipped on his wine goblet and landed throat first on a letter opener. Someone sends a second pouch. They rarely do. Let's look at the possibilities. Option 1, the silent patron. They never speak to you again. You were a shadow, a service, a rumor. They vanish like fog. Option 2, the nervous one. They hear the deed is done and panic. You now know too much. So instead of paying, they pay someone else to deal with you. And now you're the loose end. Congratulations. You've been upgraded from killer to prey. Option 3, the liar. They never had the other half. They used their cousin's dowry to fund the first pouch and hoped you die trying. Spoiler, you didn't. But now they owe you. And that's inconvenient for them. And even if they do pay, it's not like you're getting gold bars and a warm handshake. You might get another dirty pouch, or a note left behind a tree, or a whisper in a tavern that the crow sings tonight, which is medieval for check behind the dung cart for your payment. And you do, and it's there, and it smells like fish, but it is money. So you walk away, and try not to wonder if it's cursed, because honestly it might be. Assassins learn to never count on payment, which is why many demanded a larger first half, or a hostage, or collateral. Give me your ring, your daughter's necklace, your left shoe. If the second half never came, at least they had something. Of course, asking for too much meant getting stabbed before you even started. It was a balance, one between greed and survival, and in most cases, neither one. Some tried to keep ledgers, tally their kills, estimate expected payments, track missed wages like a very quiet medieval accountant. But ledgers get stolen, ledgers get found, ledgers get you tied to a stake and asked very politely to explain what swift removal means next to the bishop's name. So most assassins gave up. They took what they could, spent it fast, buried the rest, and moved on, always moved on. But here's the real kicker. Even when they did get paid, it wasn't life-changing. Silver buys food, maybe a donkey, a cloak without holes, a night somewhere without fleas. It doesn't buy safety. It doesn't buy a future. You don't retire on assassin money. You survive with it until the next job and the next betrayal. Once in a while, a noble client would offer a bonus. Not money, but something worse. A title, land, employment, You'll be my personal problem solver. Which meant, please kill people, but in a uniform this time. It was tempting. A place to sleep, a salary, maybe even wine that wasn't watered down. But it also meant visibility, permanence. And in this line of work, that's a slow form of death. Because the longer people know your face, the more people want to rearrange it with something heavy. So the wise ones, they took the half. They did the job. And they vanished. They didn't wait for the other half. Because in the world of medieval assassination, the second payment was just bait. And the hook was almost always poison. Or a noose. Or a very suspicious gift basket with a dagger inside. So the next time someone hands you a pouch of silver and says, "More to come when it's done," smile, take it, and then disappear. Because in this business, the only reliable payment is survival. And even that's on loan. Next time, we'll talk about the most unpredictable weapon in the assassin's kit. Poison. It sounds elegant. It isn't. It sounds clean. It's not. It sounds like something you can control. But ask anyone who's ever tried a dough stew for a paranoid bishop. It doesn't go well. See you in segment 6. And if you hear someone whispering your name tonight, maybe don't follow the sound. Welcome back. Tonight we stir the pot. Literally, you survived betrayal. You've been underpaid. You've gotten good at sneaking through alleys and not making eye contact with dogs. But tonight we explore one of the most famous, misunderstood, and frequently disappointing tools of the medieval assassin, poison. Because while it sounds dramatic, in practice, it was more like a gamble with a 60% chance of failure and a 100% chance of vomiting. Not exactly elegant. Let's start with the basics. Medieval poisons were not smooth, odorless drops in a crystal goblet. They were powders made from crushed plants, oils extracted from toad glands, paste scraped from minerals, and sometimes things best left unmentioned. One recipe involved mashed leeches and milk. Another required soaking a dead rat in wine for 7 days. Yes, that's what we're working with here. You can buy poison from a shelf labeled Assassin's Deluxe. You had to know someone, a wise woman, a wandering herbalist, a suspicious monk with too many vials and not enough eyebrows. Even then, you had to trust that the person who sold you the poison didn't dilute it or accidentally hand you sleeping powder instead. Because the last thing you want when trying to eliminate a count is for him to yawn and go to bed early. And the dosage? That was a guessing game. Give too little, and the victim feels mildly sick and suspicious of stew. Give too much, and the smell alone alerts the taster. Hit the sweet spot, and you might still get caught. Because here's what no one tells you about poison. It doesn't always work right away. Sometimes it takes hours, sometimes days, and sometimes your target just throws up and decides to fast for a week. Now you're stuck outside the manor, shivering in a bush, wondering if you just wasted half a month's wages on spicy leaf juice. And poison wasn't just about the blend. It was about the delivery. You had to get it into something the target would eat, which was hard because important people in the Middle Ages were paranoid. Their food was tasted first by someone else, often 2 or 3 someone else's, and sometimes the dog. Yes, again with the dogs. Their food was also blessed, smelled, sampled, sometimes fed to a chicken, and observed for 5 minutes. One king refused to eat stew unless it had first been offered to a priest, a taster, a pigeon, and his sister's pet goat. The goat died once. He never ate stew again. So how do you poison someone who never eats untested food? You have options. None of them good. You could bribe a cook, but they talk. You could sneak into the kitchen, but that's a hanging offense. You could try the bath oil, the candle wax, the ink on a love letter, but even then you had to wait and watch. Watch them rub it in, light it, lick it, whatever it was you hoped would do the job. And if they didn't, well, now you've got poison ink in circulation. Good luck with that. Some assassins try to be clever. They'd smear poison on blades, door handles, or goblets. Some rub it on coins. One poured it into holy water. Another tried to lace a nobleman's wig. Spoiler, the wig was fake. The noble was bald. The poisoner died confused and disappointed. There was also the risk of backfire. Literally, many medieval poisons had strong smells, strong tastes, strong effects. One popular mixture caused a victim to burst into sudden, uncontrollable sweat. Another caused immediate bowel evacuation. One unlucky baron projectile vomited mid-sermon and accidentally confessed to embezzling church funds. He survived. The assassin did not. And let's not forget, poison was illegal. Very illegal. Even owning suspicious herbs could get you accused of witchcraft, because in the Middle Ages, chemistry and sorcery shared the same branding department. If you carried belladonna, wolfsbane, or powdered stone with strange carvings, you weren't called scientist. You were a curse maker. And the punishment? Burning. Sometimes hanging. Occasionally both. In that order. So most assassins used poison sparingly. Only when they had time. Only when they had access. Only when the risk was somehow lower than stabbing someone in the dark and fleeing barefoot through a goat pen, which admittedly was still pretty risky. And yet, poison remained in the toolkit because it had potential. It could be silent. It could be clean. It could, once in a while, work so perfectly that the target fell asleep and never woke up, leaving behind only a faint aroma of clothes and regret. But that was rare. Most of the time, poison just made things messier. Harder, more suspicious, less whisper of death, and more awkward dinner party with a sudden emergency. Once, an assassin tried to poison a bishop's wine. He bribed the taster, paid double. The taster drank it, winked. The bishop raised his cup, paused, looked directly at the assassin, sitting at the far end of the room in a fake beard and clerical robes, then poured the wine into a plant. The plant died instantly. The bishop stood up, pointed at the assassin, and yelled, "Get him!" The beard fell off. The assassin ran. The bishop lived another 17 years. Moral of the story? Don't trust the taster. So, yes, poison sounds elegant. But in reality, it was risky, smelly, unpredictable, and often more deadly to the user than the target. The assassin who relied too much on poison rarely lived long enough to explain the recipe. And if you did succeed, no one believed it was poison. They'd say the victim choked, or caught a chill, or died of melancholy. So even the victory was unsatisfying. You didn't get credit. You didn't get paid. You just got to pack up your vials and leave town. Again, next time, we'll discuss the art of not being recognized. Because a blade is scary. Poison is clever. But the real skill is becoming someone else. A nun, a monk, a peddler, a duck farmer, anyone but you. See you in segment 7. And remember, if your soup smells like almonds, maybe skip dinner. Welcome back, Shadow Walker. Tonight we take a long, quiet breath, because it's time to talk about identity, or more accurately, the loss of it, because being a medieval assassin didn't just mean killing quietly. It meant living quietly. It meant becoming someone else, every day, every hour, every moment, until even you weren't sure who you were anymore. So let's talk about disguises. Not the cool kind, just the kind that kept you breathing. Forget hoods and leather. Forget the sleek, tailored cloaks you've seen in movies. Real medieval assassins dressed like nobodies, because if someone remembered what you were wearing, you'd already failed. The goal was not to stand out, not to inspire fear, but to vanish, to be so boring, so muddy, so completely forgettable that if someone tried to describe you, they'd say, a tunic? Brownish? Maybe had a nose. Perfect. There were a few go-to disguises. The pilgrim, covered head to toe. No one asks questions. Pilgrims are everywhere. They're tired. They smell. They mumble prayers. You can sleep in churches, eat in charity kitchens, and walk through noble estates by simply holding a rosary and looking sad. The monk, even better than the pilgrim. Everyone avoids monks because they might ask for confession. Monks are allowed into libraries, kitchens, gardens. Bonus, rogues hide weapons. Downside, tonsure. Shaving your head like a bowl, not a good look when the job's done. The merchant, easy to fake. Just carry something. Herbs, pots, buttons, anything. If you talk fast and carry junk, people assume you're harmless. Problem? People remember merchants, especially if you're bad at sales. The servant. If you can steal a livery coat and keep your head down, no one questions you. Just don't speak. Ever. Accents give you away faster than a shiny dagger. Then there's the facial hair. Fake beards were common. Bad fake beards were more common. A real assassin's toolkit might include goat hair, tree sap, a curved bone for application, and silent tears of shame. Because yes, the beard always fell off at the worst possible time. One assassin lost his beard while pretending to be a bishop. Mid-sermon, he sneezed, the beard hit the floor, and the choir screamed. He survived. The organist did not. Long story. Some assassins used dirt, literal dirt, smeared on your face, your hands, your clothes. Add mud to your hair. Make yourself filthy enough, and people look away. Nobody wants to study the details of someone who looks like they sleep in a goat pen, which, ironically, you often did. You learned to walk differently, to slouch, to shuffle, to limp or twitch, or frown just enough to make people forget your face. You developed voices, muttered accents, toothless grins, lies about your hometown, your missing cousin, your goat named Balthazar. All fake, all disposable, all necessary. Because here's the terrible truth. The more convincing your disguise, the more you disappeared. Until eventually, there was no you left. Just roles, masks, scripts, a different name in every town. A different story for every night. And always, always the same empty space inside, quietly asking, who am I really? And the answer didn't matter, because someone else just offered silver and you got a job to do. But even the best disguises failed, because recognition isn't always visual. Sometimes it's a smell, an odd phrase, the way you handle a blade, a limp you forgot to fake, a scar that peeks out from under your hood. Once, an assassin was recognized by a laugh. They disguised themselves as a traveling juggler. But someone in the market remembered that laugh from a fire 2 years ago. That was it. They were chased halfway to the coast by a mob holding pitchforks, torches, and, somehow, a live turkey. They weren't seen again. But the turkey lived a long, happy life. Sometimes the disguise didn't fail. You did. You forgot your story. You mixed up the name. You used the wrong regional insult. You bowed when you were supposed to nod. And suddenly the guards were watching. The servants were whispering. The dogs were growling. And the priest was holding his cross a little too tightly. Time to go. So how did assassins survive? They became chameleons. Blank canvases. They watched, listened, adapted. They walked through villages like smoke, slipped into weddings, prayers, funerals. They became the background, until even they didn't remember where they were supposed to be next. But even the best disguise had one fatal flaw: staying in character, not for minutes, for hours, sometimes days. Pretending to be a deaf-stable boy while sleeping in a hayloft, milking goats, answering no one, and remembering a limp on the right leg. Harder than it sounds. Once, an assassin posing as a mute servant got into this state. The problem? He forgot to act mute during dinner. He laughed at a joke about pigs. Everyone stared. The steward stood up slowly and said, "Did the mute boy just chuckle?" It was a long night. So yes, disguises sound clever. They are, but they're exhausting, dangerous, fragile. A single mistake, a sneeze, a twitch, a wrong button on the wrong tunic, and you're no longer Brother Elric from the Eastern Abbey. You're that man who's about to be arrested and possibly set on fire. Next time, we'll talk about what happens when everything does go right. The kill is clean. The disguise works. The escape is smooth. And yet you feel nothing, because you're not the hero. You're not even the villain. You're just gone. See you in segment 8. And if you're going to pretend to be a monk tomorrow, try to remember which hand holds a cross. It's always the little things. Still with me? Good. We've talked about the weapons, the poisons, The disguise is in dirt and muttered false names. But let's say, just this once, everything goes right. You sneak in. You pass the guards. The dogs don't bark. The cook doesn't notice you taking the back stairs. And somehow you reach the chamber. The candle is low. The air smells like sweat, incense, and wine. Your target is asleep. You raise the blade. And when it's done, it's done. You don't panic. You don't get caught. You slip away like mist, quiet as a whispered sin. You did it. You should feel victorious. But you don't, because there's no glory in what you just did. Just guts. Literal ones. Sometimes, being a medieval assassin wasn't heroic. No crowds cheered. No one built statues. There was no cloak made of wolf fur and compliments waiting for you at the inn. There was just you, alone, tired, covered in sweat that didn't belong to you, and already wondering if the person who paid you is about to send someone else to return the favor. Let's look at what happens next. You run. Always. Even if no one saw you. Even if the Lord Steward thinks it was a tragic accident involving sharp cheese and a prayer candle. You leave, because the longer you stay, the more eyes start to linger. And the only thing worse than being caught is being blamed. Because medieval justice, not known for subtlety. You walk through the woods. Your boots are wet. Again, your face is numb. You haven't eaten in 2 days. And the last thing you smelled before slipping out the castle window was your own heartbeat. You make it to a roadside inn. You sit in the corner. You order broth. You try not to shake. A bard strums a lazy tune near the fire. Someone laughs. You want to laugh too, but you can't remember how. Because even when the job goes right, it doesn't feel right. Killing isn't noble. It's not tidy. It's not clean. It's messy, loud, wet, slippery. Your hands don't feel like yours afterward. Your clothes stink for days. And the sound? That stays with you. The breath that catches. The gasp. The silence afterward that's somehow too quiet. That's what you carry. Not medals. Not stories. Just moments. On repeat. And you can't talk about it. You can't say, hey, I really need to unpack that time I drowned a bear in his own bathwater. Because if you do, you die. So you carry it. Quietly. Like everything else. Sometimes you don't even know who you just killed. The client gave you a name. You assumed it was a tyrant. A monster. Someone cruel. But what if they weren't? What if it was a political rival? A scapegoat? Someone with secrets but no sins? You'll never know. And worse, you'll never ask. Because asking means caring. And care means slowing down. And slowing down means getting caught. So instead of glory, you get trauma. Instead of cheers, you get stares. Instead of a title, you get a fake name you barely remember. And instead of a future, you get another job. Maybe, if you're lucky. And sometimes you start to imagine a different life. A cottage, a field, a dog that doesn't bark at you. But you know that's fantasy. Because even if you stopped now, the ghosts would follow. The lies, the kills, the whispers. There's no returning from what you've done. Not really. So you keep walking. Keep hiding. Keep pretending that survival feels like success. Even when it doesn't. Because here's the secret. No assassin ever wanted to be an assassin. They wanted to be something else. A farmer. A monk. A mother. A lover. But life had other plans. And the blade? It's not a badge. It's a burden. So the next time you hear about some legendary assassin, the one who climbed the walls of Castle Marrow and vanished before the guard's candle burned down, know this. They didn't feel like a legend. They felt like a stain. They didn't celebrate. They ran. And maybe if they were very lucky, they lived long enough to regret it. Still awake? Just barely? Perfect. We're almost at the end. Not just of the night, but of the assassin. Because no matter how quiet, no matter how clever, no matter how many times they slipped away through torchlit alleys and fog-drenched moors, every assassin had an ending. And yes, it usually sucked. Let's begin with the obvious. No one retires from this job. You don't settle down. You don't open a tavern. You don't spend your twilight years carving wooden ducks beside a river. You vanish. Or you get caught. Or someone else gets nervous. And in this line of work, getting nervous is a death sentence. Sometimes it's fast. The guard sees you. The alarm bell rings. A sword flashes. A boot in your ribs. And then you're just another bloodstain on castle stairs. People walk around it for a day or two. Then they forget you. Other times it's slower. You get old. Your hands shake. Your knees ache on cobblestones. You forget the names you gave last week. You run out of fake accents. You miss a step. You say the wrong thing. And suddenly, someone's looking at you too long, asking too many questions. And you realize this is it. Some die on the job, mid-mission, in disguise, trying to climb out a window as a candle flickers behind them. Others die long after the killing stops, caught by a tip, recognized by an old taverner who never forgets a face. One was found because of a scar on his thumb, another because he limped in the wrong direction. Details, always a little details. Then there are the ones who get set up by clients, by rivals, by innkeepers who overheard a name whispered into a bowl of stew. They think they're walking into a payment. Instead, it's a trap. Sometimes it's a rope. Sometimes it's fire. Sometimes it's just a crowd that doesn't ask questions, only grabs the nearest rock and starts swinging. And the worst deaths? The ones no one sees. No glory. No noise. Just silence. A man found face down in a ditch. A woman curled beneath a bridge. A body hanging in the woods with a coin pouch still clutched in hand. The end of the line. Not dramatic. Just final. And you'd think, after a while, assassins would plan for this. Some did. They buried gold. They left notes. They tried to pass on lessons to someone younger, more desperate. But the truth? There was no pension. No ceremony. No, thank you for your years of silent service. There was just an ending, one you didn't get to write. Let's tell a story. One assassin, his name was probably fake, but people called him Gray. He worked for years. Never got caught. He was quiet, careful, brilliant. Then one day, he missed a cue, a bird call that was supposed to signal abort. He kept going, did the job. But by the time he got back to the alley, the man who hired him was gone. The payment too. And worse, the bird call wasn't missed. It was changed. A new call. A new signal. A trap. Gray vanished that night. They say his boots were found 6 months later in a pawn shop. Nothing else. Another story. A woman known as the Stitch. She used threads. Knots. Strangulation only. Never used a blade. They say she once took out a duke using only a scarf and a lullaby. She disappeared after her final job. Some say she became a nun. Others say she was buried beneath the floorboards of the very convent she hid in. No one knows. No one will. That's the pattern. Because when you live in shadows, you die in shadows. No one remembers your name. Only rumors. Whispers. Scary stories told at taverns by candlelight. And sometimes the assassin just stops. Can't kill anymore. Can't sleep. Can't forget. They try to walk away. Change their name. Become a gardener. A healer. A weaver of baskets. But the past? It follows. The client they disappointed. The guard they escaped. The one witness who never forgot their eyes. Sooner or later, it catches up, and the person they were pretending to be gets erased. All over again. So how does it end? Badly. Quietly. Unnoticed. Or worse, famous. Because some assassins do get remembered. But not by name. By myth. By fear. By the word traitor scratched into a cell wall. By a story no one tells quite the same way twice. They become ghosts. Not because they haunt, but because they're already gone. Still awake? Then stay with me, because we've reached our final chapter. Next time, we'll explore the myth, the legacy, the idea of the invisible killer, the whisper behind the legend, because even in death, the assassin isn't finished. At least, not in the stories. Segment 10 is next. One more shadow to walk through. And then, sleep. This is it, the final chapter. If you're still awake, thank you. You've walked through cold alleys, crawled through dirt cellars, hidden in wine barrels, and waited out rainstorms beneath the floorboards of a monastery. You become the assassin. But tonight, we step outside the facts, into the fog, into the myth. Because no matter how miserable, muddy, and lonely the real assassin's life was, stories remember them differently, romantically, dangerously, even reverently. They call them ghosts. They call them shadows. They called them the invisible killers. Let's talk about that. It started with fear. Real assassins didn't wear costumes or brand logos. They were quiet, forgettable. So when someone important died, suddenly, silently, suspiciously, people needed something to blame, something bigger, something unreal. Because it's terrifying to admit that your dupe could be undone by a tired woman with a kitchen knife and a fake name. It's easier to believe in monsters. That's where the myth began. The tales, the warnings, the bedtime stories whispered by candlelight, saying, "Don't stay out late. The silent man walks tonight. Don't lie to the priest. The woman in gray might hear. Don't trust strangers who don't blink." Children believed it. Servants spread it. And soon, even nobles began to wonder. Some said assassins could vanish in smoke, that they stepped between shadows like doorways, that they walked backwards to confuse time itself. One legend claimed assassins could walk through walls, but only on nights when the moon was missing. Another said they spoke no words, but made dogs whimper and mirrors crack. People swore they saw cloaked figures watching from towers, eyes in the trees, blades with no hands, holding them, always seen for a moment and then gone. Of course, none of it was true. There was no smoke magic, no cursed daggers, just very tired people trying not to die. But over time, the myth grew bigger than the truth. The less people knew, the more they invented, and so the assassin became something else, a symbol of fear, of revenge, of death that cannot be escaped. And here's the strange part. Assassins use the myth. They liked it, because when people believe you can kill with a whisper and vanish with the wind, they don't ask questions. They don't fight. They lock their doors. They stay afraid, and fear is armor. Some even fed the myth. They'd leave symbols at the scene. A feather, a coin, a red string tied around a candle. Just enough to be remembered, not as a person, but as a presence. A legend. They stopped being real. They became stories. Over time, the line blurred. No one knew what was real anymore. Did that duchess choke on stew? Or was it the work of the whisper? Did the prince fall from the tower? Or was he pushed by the Grey Widow? Was the merchant really robbed? Or was it vengeance from the one who wears no name? It didn't matter. The name stuck. The myth grew. And the real assassin buried beneath it all. And maybe that's the most honest part. Because if you live long enough pretending to be other people, eventually you're no one. You vanish. Not into smoke, but into silence. The myth stays. You don't. But maybe that was the point. Assassins didn't want fame. They didn't want songs or statues. They wanted distance, anonymity, escape. And the myth, that gave it to them. Immortality in whispers. So yes, it sucked to be a medieval assassin. You were poor, alone, hunted. You used knives that bent in the rain, poisons that killed the cook, and disguises held together with mud and hope. You never slept deeply. You never stayed long. You never, ever trusted the person pouring your wine. But in the end, you became something more. Not glorious, not glamorous, just remembered, in shadows. So if you're still listening, still curled beneath the covers, still letting history hum in your ears like a lullaby, thank you. Thank you for walking with the forgotten, for learning what it really meant to be the blade in the dark. Not the hero, not the villain, just a footnote with dirt on their boots, the ghost in the back of the room, the reason someone locked the door and slept with one eye open. If you enjoyed tonight's journey, consider subscribing. No pressure, of course. Only if you like your history boring and your assassins tragic. I'll be here again soon, with another story, another shadow, another whisper. Until then, stay quiet, stay kind, and sleep deeply. The blade is gone. Only the myth remains.